single mother sold cakes from her tiny kitchen. Then one unexpected customer turned her dream into an empire. Isla Monroe was 33 years old when she sold her first real cake from a kitchen so small she had to open the oven door carefully or it hit the table. The apartment had one bedroom, one narrow hallway, and a window above the sink that looked directly at the brick wall of the building next door. In the mornings, the room smelled of vanilla, butter, and sometimes burnt sugar. At night, it smelled of dish soap, exhaustion, and whatever fear leaves behind when it settles into the walls of a place too long. Her daughter, Lily, was 6 then. She slept in the bedroom. Isla slept on a fold-out sofa in the living room because the bedroom was the only space where Lily could keep her school books, her stuffed rabbit, and the kind of safety a child needs when the adults around her are pretending everything is still under control. Nothing had been under control for almost 2 years. Lily's father had left when the girl was 4, not dramatically. No screaming, no slammed doors, no final scene anyone could point to later and say, that was the moment it broke. He had simply grown smaller inside the marriage until one day he packed a suitcase, said he needed space, and left behind a stack of unpaid bills, a half-empty closet, and a wife who understood too late that some men disappear long before they go. At the time, Isla had already been working part-time at a bakery and taking freelance cake orders whenever she could. She knew how to pipe roses, level sponge, temper chocolate, and stretch 3 ingredients into something that looked expensive. But skill was not the same thing as stability. The bakery where she worked closed 8 months after her husband left. The owner said business had become impossible, rent was too high, ingredients cost more, customers wanted artisan quality at supermarket prices. He cried when he told the staff, then he locked the doors for good. After that, Isla had only 2 choices: find another job that paid just enough to keep her poor, or use the one thing she knew how to do better than almost anyone she had met. So she began baking from home, not because it sounded romantic, not because she dreamed of entrepreneurship. Because Lily needed lunch money, the power bill was late, and no landlord in the city had ever accepted "I'm trying my best" as payment. At first, the orders were tiny: 12 cupcakes for a school event, a chocolate cake for a mechanic's wife, a simple sponge with strawberries for a church luncheon. Then came baby showers, birthdays, office parties, retirement dinners. Nothing elegant, nothing that suggested a future empire. Just ordinary celebrations held together by women who still believed cake made people kinder for a few minutes. Isla advertised in local community groups. A friend posted pictures online. Lily helped put stickers on the boxes. The sticker simply said, "Monroe cakes baked fresh in small batches." It was not branding, it was survival with neat handwriting. By the end of the first year, Isla had enough repeat customers to stop searching for other jobs. By the end of the second, she was still 1 missed month away from disaster. That was the hardest part. From the outside, people thought she was doing better. Her cakes looked professional. Her customer list was growing. She had a waiting list for weekends. But success at that stage was fragile. 1 broken oven, 1 illness, 1 rent increase, 1 school emergency. That was all it would take. She kept every receipt in a shoebox. She bought flour in bulk when she could afford it. She patched the old mixer with tape until the machine looked more repaired than original. And every night, after Lily had fallen asleep, Isla stood alone in the kitchen beneath the yellow light over the stove and baked for people whose lives seemed far simpler from the outside. One Thursday in October, when rain had been falling since noon and the city felt made of wet pavement and brake lights, Isla received a call at 7:15 in the evening. She almost didn't answer. Her hands were covered in frosting. Lily was finishing homework at the table and a red velvet cake still needed to be boxed for a morning delivery. But the number was unfamiliar, and unfamiliar numbers often meant orders. "Monroe cakes," she said. There was a brief silence. Then an older man's voice answered, "I was given your name by the florist on Ashbury Street." Isla wiped one hand on a towel. "All right. I need a cake for tomorrow. I usually need more notice than that." "I understand." His voice was calm, quiet, and almost formal. Not rude, not entitled, just tired. What kind of cake? She asked. A small one. How many servings? Perhaps 8. That's manageable. She reached for a pen. What flavor? The man hesitated. Chocolate, if possible, but not too sweet. She wrote it down. Any decoration? Another silence. Then he said, It's for my wife. Something in the way he said it made Isla stop writing. Not my wife's birthday, not my wife's party. Just, it's for my wife. She asked carefully, Would you like a message on it? No, he said. She won't see it. The room went quiet around her. Rain touched the window in a soft, constant rhythm. Lily looked up from the table. Isla understood. It was not a celebration. It was memory. She used to love orange, the man added after a moment. Chocolate and orange together. I thought I remembered how her favorite cake tasted, but I don't. Isla lowered herself into the chair by the counter. Tomorrow morning? She asked. Yes. I can do it. Thank you. He gave his name as Samuel Whitmore and said he would come himself at 10. After the call ended, Isla stood still for a moment. Then Lily asked, Was it a sad cake? Isla smiled faintly. Yes. Do people buy sad cakes? Sometimes, Isla said. Those are the important ones. That night, after finishing the other orders, she stayed up until almost 2 in the morning making Samuel Whitmore's cake. 2 layers of dark chocolate sponge, orange zest in the batter, orange syrup brushed lightly between the layers, a smooth dark chocolate ganache, a border so simple it almost looked old-fashioned. No bright decorations, no cheerful colors. Just a cake made with the kind of care people recognize immediately if they have ever missed someone deeply enough. At 10 the next morning, Samuel Whitmore arrived exactly on time. He was older than she expected, perhaps in his late 60s, wearing a dark overcoat and carrying an umbrella polished enough to look expensive. But there was nothing flashy about him, no obvious wealth, no dramatic entrance. He looked like a man who had learned long ago how to take up only the space he needed. When Isla opened the box for him to inspect the cake, he looked at it for a long moment before speaking. It's beautiful, he said. It's simple. So was she. He smiled when he said it, but the smile carried years inside it. He paid in cash. Then, before leaving, he asked, Do you only work from home? Yes. Do you want a bakery? The question came so directly that Isla almost laughed. Every baker wants a bakery. That wasn't my question. She looked at him. Yes, she said. I do. Samuel nodded once as if confirming something for himself. Then he took the box and left. Isla thought about him twice that day, once when she wondered if the cake had been good enough, and again that evening when she realized she had forgotten to ask how he found her. Then she went back to work. People with dreams and overdue bills do not have the luxury of wondering too long about mysterious customers. A week later, Samuel Whitmore called again. This time he said, I'd like to place a larger order. How large? 200 individual cakes. Isla nearly dropped the bowl she was holding. For when? For a foundation dinner next Saturday. She stared at the wall. 200. Yes. I'm one person. I know. I work from an apartment. I know that too. She leaned against the counter. What kind of dinner? A charitable event at the Whitmore Grand Hotel. The name hit her immediately. The Whitmore Grand was one of the most expensive hotels in the city. Old money, polished marble, private events, weddings. People spent years paying off. Isla had once passed through its lobby to deliver a birthday cake for a florist and had felt poor just standing on the carpet. She asked slowly, What exactly do you want? Miniature versions of the orange chocolate cake. Isla tried to think clearly. Mr. Whitmore, I don't think you understand my setup. No, he said almost gently. I think I understand it very well. She did not know what to say. Samuel continued. You told me you wanted a bakery. Yes. Then let this be the first day you behave like someone who intends to own one. She closed her eyes. That sounds inspiring, she said. But inspiration does not create refrigeration, staff, transport, or 10 extra hours in a day. For the first time, Samuel laughed. It was a soft, brief sound. Good, he said. I was hoping you had some sense. What does that mean? It means I'm not offering charity, I'm offering business. If you can produce the order, I'll pay your full price in advance. If you need to rent a commercial kitchen for a week, do it. If you need temporary help, hire it. If you believe you cannot manage it, say no. Why me? Because my guests should eat the best cake in the room. That still doesn't explain why me. Samuel was quiet for a second. Then he said, because I spent 30 years building businesses, and I've learned to recognize the difference between someone who bakes for compliments and someone who bakes because failure is not an option. He placed the order. He paid 50% that same afternoon. And for the first time in 3 years, Isla saw money arrive before panic did. The week that followed nearly broke her. She rented night hours in a shared commercial kitchen across town. A former co-worker named Denise agreed to help for cash. Lily stayed with Isla's sister for 4 days. The first batch of ganache split. The kitchen refrigerator failed one night. A supplier delivered the wrong boxes. Isla cried once in the storage room for exactly 4 minutes, then washed her face and went back to work. On the night before the event, she stood in the rented kitchen at 1:30 in the morning surrounded by 200 finished cakes, each one glossy, boxed, and labeled. Denise sat on a flour sack and said, "If this works, your life changes." Isla looked at the rows of cakes. "If this works," she answered, "my rent gets paid." The event changed more than her rent. The cakes were served after dinner at the Whitmore Grand. Samuel did not sit near them. He did not make a speech or introduce Isla dramatically to a room full of wealthy guests. He simply asked the event manager to place the cakes on the tables and let people react honestly. They did. By the end of the evening, 3 women asked who made them. A corporate events director requested a card. A wedding planner asked whether Isla handled large dessert tables. The executive pastry chef of the hotel, who had first objected to an outside baker, admitted the cakes were better than inconveniently good. The following Monday, Isla received 4 serious inquiries. By the end of the month, she had more large orders than her apartment kitchen could legally or physically handle. That was when Samuel asked her to meet him in the lounge of the Whitmore Grand. She wore her best dark dress and the only heels she still owned. Samuel was waiting by the window with tea. He gestured for her to sit. "I assume you know by now who I am," he said. "Yes." Samuel Whitmore was not merely a hotel customer. He was the founder of Whitmore Hospitality Group, a company that owned hotels, clubs, and event venues in 5 cities. He had built it over 40 years. Now his son ran most of the operations, but Samuel still chaired the board and retained the sort of quiet influence money gathers when it has survived long enough. Isla should have felt intimidated. Instead, she felt tired. "Tired is useful," Samuel said when she admitted it. "It usually means you're close to changing something." He slid a folder across the table. Inside was a simple financial proposal, a minority investment. Enough money to help her lease a production space, buy equipment, and hire staff. No controlling share, no takeover language, no insulting conditions. In return, Whitmore Hospitality would receive preferred access to her business for premium events and first discussion rights if she ever wanted to expand into hotel retail partnerships. Isla read it twice, then a third time. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. Samuel stirred his tea. "My wife spent 20 years telling me that the saddest thing in business is watching capable people die at the scale of their own fear." He looked up. "She would have liked you." Isla felt something tighten in her throat. "I don't want rescuing," she said. "Good. Rescue creates gratitude. Investment creates responsibility. I prefer the second." She took the deal. Not because it was magical, because it was fair, and because for the first time someone with real power had looked at her work and seen a company instead of a woman with a mixer in a cramped apartment. The first Monroe Cake studio opened 6 months later in a narrow brick building near the wholesale market. It had one production kitchen, one front counter, and space for 4 small tables by the window. Lily, now 7, announced to everyone that it was our cake shop, though she still did homework behind the counter and occasionally fell asleep there on slow afternoons. The first year was harder than Isla had imagined. Owning a business did not free her from labor. It multiplied it. She had to manage staff, suppliers, insurance, packaging, bookkeeping, licensing, delivery schedules, and customers who loved handmade products but complained when handmade processes took longer than supermarkets. One pastry cook quit 2 days before a wedding order. The oven broke in July. A refrigerator leak ruined $300 worth of butter. Isla learned that growth was not the opposite of struggle. It was simply struggle wearing cleaner clothes. But the orders kept growing. Hotels wanted plated desserts. Law firms ordered cakes for client events. A hospital network contracted with Monroe Cakes for staff appreciation days and holiday gift boxes. The city's best wedding planner made Isla her preferred baker after tasting a lemon elderflower cake that made one bride cry at the tasting table. Then came the product that changed the scale of the business completely: cake jars. Not because they were fashionable, though they were, because they shipped well, stayed fresh, looked beautiful, and allowed ordinary customers to buy Monroe cakes at a lower price point than a custom celebration cake. At first, Isla resisted the idea. It felt smaller than the elegant cakes she loved. But one of her younger employees, a sharp operations assistant named Priya, pointed out the obvious. "You don't build an empire one wedding cake at a time," she said. "You build it by finding the thing people can buy every week." They launched 3 flavors: chocolate orange, vanilla berry, salted caramel. The jars appeared in Whitmore Hotel gift shops first, then in premium grocery stores, then online. Within 18 months, Monroe Cakes had outgrown the studio. Within 3 years, the company had a central production facility, 2 retail cafes, and a distribution deal across the region. By the 5th year, Isla employed more than 100 people. People started using the word empire. She hated it at first. Empire sounded arrogant, too polished, too far from the woman who had once piped frosting while her daughter colored at the kitchen table. But growth has its own vocabulary. Soon there were investors calling, magazines asking for interviews, banks that once would not have taken her seriously offering expansion financing, and competitors trying to copy her packaging, her pricing, even the little handwritten style of the labels. Samuel watched it all with quiet satisfaction. He never interfered unless asked. Sometimes he came to the flagship cafe on Wednesday afternoons and ordered tea with a slice of orange chocolate cake. Lily, older now and no longer embarrassed by affection, would kiss his cheek and steal the chocolate curls from his plate. One winter, when Monroe Cakes was preparing to expand nationally, Isla sat with Samuel in the cafe after closing. Snow moved softly past the window. Staff cleaned in the back. The company had just signed a major retail agreement that would put Monroe Cakes products in airports, hospitals, and stores across the country. "It's too large," Isla said quietly. Samuel smiled. "It is," he answered. "What if I ruin it?" "You will ruin parts of it." She looked at him. He sipped his tea. "You'll hire too quickly somewhere. Trust the wrong supplier once. Launch a product too early or too late. Open one location that should never have existed. Build something imperfect. That is what happens when a real business grows." "That's supposed to comfort me?" "It should." "Why?" "Because only people who actually build things make mistakes at scale." He set the cup down. "Just remember what made the first cake matter." Years later, when Monroe Cakes had become a national dessert brand with cafes, packaged lines, hotel partnerships, and a production company large enough to supply half the country, reporters kept asking Isla the same lazy question. What was the turning point? They wanted a single moment, a neat answer, a story that fit inside a business article headline. So she would tell them about the unexpected customer, the widower who called for a small chocolate orange cake, the hotel order, the first investment. All of that was true, but it was never the whole truth, because the customer did not build the empire. He opened the door. Isla walked through it carrying years of unpaid fear, practiced skill, and the discipline of someone who had already survived worse than business risk. On the 10th anniversary of Monroe Cakes, Isla stood inside the company's largest production facility and looked through the glass wall at the lines moving steadily beyond it. Jars, layer cakes, holiday gift boxes, wholesale desserts for hotels and hospitals. Everything clean, measured, beautiful, and impossibly far from the apartment kitchen where it began. Lily, now 16, stood beside her. "You know," the girl said, "if he hadn't called, maybe you still would have done this." Isla smiled. "Maybe." "You think so?" "No," Isla admitted. "Not like this." Lily was quiet for a moment. Then she asked, "So he changed everything?" Isla looked out at the facility, at the employees in white coats, at the packaging labeled Monroe Cakes, at the life built from butter, exhaustion, risk, and one fair chance. "No," she said softly, "he didn't change everything." "What did he change?" "He made the world look at me a little sooner than it would have." That night, after the anniversary event ended, Isla stopped by the old apartment building on Birch Street. She hadn't lived there in years. The brick wall outside the kitchen window was still there. The alley was still narrow. The place looked even smaller than she remembered. She stood on the sidewalk for a while and thought about the woman she had been there. Tired, proud, scared, always counting money in her head, always pretending Lily couldn't see the fear. That woman had not known about hotel contracts or production facilities or investment structures, but she knew how to keep going when the numbers were cruel and the room felt too tight to hold a future. That was the real beginning, not the empire, not the investor, not the magazine covers. The real beginning was a tiny kitchen and a single mother who kept baking long after easier people would have stopped. And when the unexpected customer finally arrived, he did not turn flour into fortune by magic. He simply recognized what was already there: talent, hunger, discipline, a business waiting for someone important enough to say out loud that it was won. By the time Samuel Whitmore died at 81, Monroe Cakes had expanded into 3 countries. Isla attended the funeral with Lily and brought, by family request, a simple chocolate orange cake. No gold lettering, no elaborate design, just the same quiet combination he had asked for the first time. After the service, his son found her in the reception hall and said, "He used to tell people your cakes were proof that the best investments smell like butter before they smell like money." Isla laughed, then cried, then laughed again. That was how grief worked when gratitude lived inside it. People later called her story inspirational. She never argued with them. But she knew inspiration was only the decoration. The actual structure underneath it was less glamorous. It was rent due on Friday, a child asleep in the next room, a mixer held together with tape, a woman deciding again and again that the life she wanted would not be handed to her in a clean, respectable way. Single mother sold cakes from her tiny kitchen. Then one unexpected customer. Turned her dream into an empire sounded like a miracle when written on a page. It was not a miracle. It was a business born in a room too small for dreaming, carried forward by skill, sharpened by necessity, and accelerated by one customer wise enough to see that sometimes the difference between survival and empire is not talent. It is simply the first person with power who chooses to take your work seriously.